All right, happy Friday, everybody. We are back at the whiteboard, and we're talking about something that's been in my X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, mentions of late. How do you think about targets when you are setting, for instance, a target CPA or a target ROAS or even a cost per click target? It's a question that I don't think most people talk about enough, and it's not one that most people are aware enough about, but it's so important to how your ad account moves, or if it does or doesn't. So first, when you think about Google Ads, right, there's really two kinds of targets that you have to worry about mostly. Number one is a manual bid-based target, how much you're going to pay on a per-click basis. The second is an automated target, and this takes, generally speaking, three forms. It can either be a target return on ad spend, a target CPA, or a target impression share. We're going to leave the impression share out of this because that's a different set of math. But for most accounts and most campaigns, I would say 95% plus, they are on some kind of target CPA, target ROAS, or manual bidding strategy. Again, there are outliers, there are exceptions. We'll talk about them later. Right? Whichever one you pick, like Google obviously pushes more and more people towards this automated situation, but both can get you where you want to go, right? It's the first thing you have to acknowledge. Bidding manually can work. It can work very, very well, and it can work great in certain situations like branded campaigns, competitor conquesting, or niche verticals, or places where, candidly, Google's just bad, like, for instance, running Spanish ads in California. It's a weird market with weird dynamics. Sometimes you're better off just bidding manually, right? The thing that matters is whether you pick the right target. And again, regardless of if it's manual or automated, think of targets as filters, right? We all know how filters work in email. The email from the hopefully, crazy person trying to sell you knockoff LeBron James jerseys goes to spam. The email from your very, very precious client goes into your inbox. And you can adjust your email filter to be more aggressive or tighter, or more lenient or looser. Same concept applies to your targets. Now, the difference here is who's doing the math. So let me explain. When you set an automated target, a target CPA or a target ROAS, Google is going to probabilistically determine the expected value of each click and compare that expected value to the target you set. Make sense? Maybe, maybe not. Think of it this way. If Google determines that a certain click has a 10% probability of turning into a sale, and that sale is worth $1,000, Google will multiply 10% times 1,000, get $100, and say the expected value is $100 of bidding on that click. And if your target CPA is less than $100, well, Google's going to say, okay, that click is too expensive, can't bid. If your target CPA is greater than $100, Google's going to say that passes, right? $100 expected value, target CPA of $100 or $200. Well, great, that's great. Expected cost per conversion is lower than the target. Great, let's let it go through, right? That's exactly what you see here. And what you see here is before you bid and after you bid, right? So we have these big red circles. These are really expensive clicks. For whatever reason, the expected value of this click is not sufficient to get through the filter, right? The expected value doesn't align with your account's target, so it doesn't get through. These blue ones, meanwhile, are potential clicks that do meet your qualifications, and once they get through, you bid on them, they turn green, right? Those are CPAs that you got at or below your target. And sometimes they might be a little higher and a little lower because maybe somebody, they thought Google projected them at a $1,000 sale, but they actually only bought $800 worth of stuff, right? That happens. But in a sense, what you're doing is you are restricting what clicks go into your ad account, what clicks you actually pay for based on a target. And when you use automated bidding, you are trusting Google's math on who and what to pay for and how much to pay. Slightly terrifying, but slightly fine, right? Google's pretty good at math. They've built a multi-trillion-dollar business on being decent at math. And when I say decent, I mean the errors tend to favor them pretty consistently. But fundamentally, whether it's a CPC limit, where it is literally blocking any CPC that is higher than your target, or an automated limit, where it's projecting the value and then blocking things that don't meet the criteria, this is how targets work. So then the question becomes, how do you set the target so that you get the results that you want and avoid the negative things that can happen on automated? Well, here's how we work through this. And I'm going to show you exactly how we'd go through it for a client. Right? We determine the value of the outcome. Now, in some cases, this is static, and in some cases, this is variable. So let me explain. For an e-commerce brand, the value of the outcome is variable based on the SKU that you buy. Different SKUs have different cost structures, different values, different lifetime values. A starter kit may only be $30 for a cosmetics brand, but over the long term, that starter kit turns into 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 purchases over the next year. It's worth more than, for instance, one more expensive bottle of cleanser, which you may use once or may have given as a gift and never buy again. So the value of the outcome can be variable. On the other hand, the value of the outcome can be static. A great example of this is a SaaS platform, right? We generally know for SaaS companies, okay, we have a pretty clear picture of, okay, you signed up for the enterprise package, it's this many dollars, right? Same thing could be true, for instance, for a loan underwriter. Every loan that we write, we sell off for $2,500. Fantastic, we know the value of that. Same thing could be true, for instance, for a car dealer or for window installers or for legal services, right? We know that every car accident case is worth $5,000 to us. Fantastic. We know every window application is worth $1,000. Not say that's true or false. I'm saying that you could have businesses where the value outcome is pretty much consistent. And for the ease of use, I'm just going to bark that as 1,000. The next thing we can figure out is what are our costs associated with acquiring that value and how much profit or contribution margin do we need? These are numbers you can get from your finance team. So for this case and from this particular client, again, $1,000 conversion value. The costs of getting this $1,000, like the actual costs out the door, the costs of goods sold in services, it's not exactly that, but I'm not here to give you accounting lessons. It's $350, and the contribution margin, the desired profit, is 25%. So what do we do here? We take the value, we take off the profit, we pay ourselves first, we pay for the goods second, and we're left with $400. That's how much money is floating around from this 1,000 that we have available to use to acquire this $1,000. Now, obviously, we don't want to use all 400 if we don't have to, but we can go up to 400 without putting ourselves in danger of not being able to pay ourselves the profit we need and not being able to actually get the materials. Cool. Okay, so far so good, right? So we have a $400 maximum cost to acquire. So then the question is, well, for anything lead-based, and this is a lead-based client, we're bidding, for instance, on probability of this being an actual sales qualified lead, potentially, right? Call it that. So we know, though, that every time we get a lead, we can't just get a lead in for $400 because some leads aren't qualified, some leads aren't ready, some leads go with somebody else, some leads want things that we can't offer, whatever reason. So what I have here is a probability of the outcome and an error in risk premium. So the probability of the outcome is, of all the leads that we get, what is the probability that they are actually qualified? And how sure are we? So in this case, for this particular client, looking at their historical CRM data, we know that about 35% of the marketing qualified leads turn into $1,000. And we know that that's variable on a month-to-month basis by about 25%. So some months, our conversion rate is actually about 43%, and other months, it can be sub 30%, right? So we got some variability here. So what we do then is basically create a matrix and say, okay, Google, we are bidding on marketing qualified leads. So I know that my value of a signed deal, I've got up to $400. I know that roughly 35%, and sometimes I'm better than that. In a big month, the most I can go is 175. And if you do the math, 400 times 35% times 1.25, 25% better, you get 175. And I know that on a terrible month, worst case scenario, 400 times 35% times 0.75, I get 105. So what does this tell me? If I'm setting a TCPA for $1,000 with this cost structure and this expected return, I am pretty much guaranteed, if I hit $105 cost per marketing qualified lead, to be at 400 or better. And by better, I mean better in my favor, on a per lead basis, per marketing qualified lead basis. That target CPA of 105, fantastic. I know, though, that I can go up to 175. And theoretically, the midpoint of this, the average is about 145. So if I'm setting a target CPA for this particular situation, I would work backwards and say, based on the data that I have, my target CPA needs to be between 105 and 175, likely 145, in order for automated bidding to make sense. Because what that's going to do is make sure that these big, expensive conversions don't come through my account. And I put myself in a position that the target is actually connecting what is happening in the ad account, Google Ads, Facebook Ads, to what's going on in the business, namely how much money I need to make and how much money I need to lay out to make that money. But you might say, well, Sam, how does this work for manual? Well, it just goes down one more level, right? And you can see that here. So if we know the probability of this, then all we need to know is the probability of a click turning into this, right? And then the area and risk premium, add the same thing. In our case, our data, 6% plus or minus 10%. And then you end up building out a little matrix here. So on the low end, right, on a low conversion month with a low click-through month, 105 times 6% times 0.90, 567 is the most I can pay per click. And if I'm paying 567 a click and these numbers are true, my conversions should be coming in at $400 or less for a actual signed, sealed, delivered case, deal, lead, whatever. And again, you can see how we just completely extrapolated from there all the way up. And then the final thing is usually, we're not doing TCPA. We've got variables. How does that work? Well, fundamentally, target ROAS is just a variable target CPA. That's all it is. So what we can do here is I can actually convert my target CPA into a target ROAS. Value over cost per conversion gives you an expected return. The tricky thing with target ROAS, though, is look, to go from 105 to 175 means taking my ROAS from 571 to 952. It's a big jump. You might say, well, it's a $70 difference, but it's nearly a 400% difference in target ROAS. It's kind of crazy. And again, that number goes right into your ad account and provides the same filtering so that you are making sure that you maintain the margins that you need. The entire point of doing this exercise is to make sure that the targets you set actually make sense for your business or your client's business. Because if these are wrong, in the wrong way, they're too aggressive, some of these big blow up CPCs come through and all of a sudden you start seeing your cost per conversion, your cost per sale, your cost per lead balloon out of control because candidly, Google doesn't care about you. They care about making money. And if they can sell you the big expensive click, they're going to sell you the big expensive click. Your job is to make sure that they don't, or at the very least, reduce the probability that they do. So we do that by controlling the target, by setting it smart. And candidly, this does usually require you work with a finance team to actually figure out what makes sense for your business or your client's business. Hope it's helpful and talk to you next week.